Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to say yet again what a pleasure it is to have you on the channel. And if this is the first time that you're joining us, I want to wish you a wonderful welcome as well. Now, as you can see before you, I'm doing my final NFL predictions for the year. We just finished week 18 last night. I'm recording this on the following Monday, where we have now all of our playoff teams are decided. Everything is now in place for the postseason to begin, and there are very few, that's not how I meant to say that, there are a few very interesting things to talk about. So, let's dive in. We are going to start, as we always do, on the left-hand side of your screen with the AFC. I am going to pick the Cleveland Browns in the first game against the Houston Texans, and the reason for that is simply because I think, even with Joe Flacco at quarterback, I think the Browns have the better roster than the Houston Texans, especially on defense. I think Houston has the better quarterback. I think Cleveland has the better defense, and I don't think that's particularly close. In postseason football, now this isn't the case always, but a good majority of the time in the NFL postseason, what will win you games is defense and the run game. So, with that in mind, I think Cleveland has the edge there. I also believe that the Cleveland Browns roster, having more experience in the playoffs, a lot of those guys have been there for a while, especially on the offensive line, the defensive line, and their secondary. They've all made multiple playoff appearances. They've played in multiple playoff games. You can't really say that about the Houston Texans. Their roster is very young. There's been a lot of turnover there. So I think you take that all into consideration, and I think Cleveland just edges out the Houston Texans. But with that said, I think the Houston Texans have a very bright future, and I'm very excited to see them next year, hopefully return to the playoffs, and maybe, they'll have some more to give. So my first pick is the Cleveland Browns. My second pick is another upset. I'm taking the Miami Dolphins over the Kansas City Chiefs. And I will admit, part of this could just be some unregistered bias on my end. Maybe I'm just sick of seeing the Chiefs in the playoffs all the time. If that's the case, so be it. But I will make a justification for my position. So, I think the Miami Dolphins have the better wide receivers. I think the Miami Dolphins have the better defense. I think the Miami Dolphins have the better running backs. I still don't know who their tight end is. I don't think Tua does either. But we do have to acknowledge that this is not an easy game. This is, in no way will this be an easy game for the Miami Dolphins, because the Kansas City Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and they're playing at home. Despite the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs don't have a wide receiver that, I can look at and be like, oh, that is the guy that will win them the game. I think there are a lot of limitations on the Chiefs roster this year. And I think Patrick Mahomes covers up a lot of those weaknesses. But I do think they will struggle in the postseason, at least against the Miami Dolphins. Had they been the 2 seed or the 4 seed, I think they could win. But the way that it shaked out, the place that they're in, the matchup, I think just slightly favors Miami, in my opinion at least. I'm fully prepared to be clowned on for this take in the coming weeks after the postseason has continued and our red and white overlords have taken over again. But we'll see. For my final pick in the wildcard round in the AFC, I'm going to be taking the Buffalo Bills. Now, I don't think there is much to say here. What I've said about Cleveland, or what I've said about Houston, I apologize, is true with the Steelers as well. This is a very young roster. A lot of these guys have not played a playoff game yet. And I think the Buffalo Bills have had one of the most impressive turnaround seasons I have ever seen. Now, granted, I've not been on this earth for a very long time. But in the years that I've watched football, I have never seen a team play the way that they've played over the last 5 weeks. I think they may be on a 5-game win streak or something. Something crazy like that. But I remember back in like week 12, 13, something like that, the Buffalo Bills did not look good. They looked quite horrible. In fact, they lost a couple of games that were frankly embarrassing losses. One of them to the New England Patriots, who will be picking 3rd or 4th in the draft this year. So, there were some real concerns with this team earlier in the year. However, I think they will carry that momentum with them into the postseason, and I think they will coast to a nice, smooth victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think that will be great for them because I know Buffalo Bills fans have been waiting for them to return to the Super Bowl for a very long time, and it feels like every year they get very close, but not quite close enough, and that may or may not be a spoiler for the rest of the list. We'll get to that in a moment. For now, we are switching now to the right-hand side of your screen, and we are going to make a decision for a game that I will not watch between the Eagles and the Buccaneers. Now, both of these teams have not been playing good football lately. The flip side of that is that the Eagles have not been playing good football, and they've been losing. The Buccaneers have not been playing good football, and they somehow won a game because the Carolina Panthers exist. So this game I'm not excited for in any way. I think it will be a disaster, and I think the Eagles are going to win. And I say that because I think the Eagles, and I don't want to sound like a broken clock, I think the Eagles have the better defense, I think they have the better quarterback, and I think they have the better run game. The Buccaneers, however, their defense is not too shabby. It's not a bad defense. Their quarterback, I love Baker Mayfield. I'm a Baker Mayfield fan. I don't know that he is good enough to make up for some of the deficiencies on the Buccaneers, specifically at tight end and running back, and their O-line needs some help. But if their defense can play like it did 2 years ago, then sure, they might make it out of this round. I don't know. Again, I'm probably not gonna watch this game. I don't know. It's a tough choice. I lean the Eagles a little bit. It's the NFC is much less interesting to me this year than the AFC is. So all 3 of these games just kind of bore me. So I apologize if that kind of comes through in my cadence and whatnot, but I will take the Eagles. Again, I think their defense is just better, and I think that's what's going to win them the game eventually. Speaking of the better defense, I'm taking another upset. This is gonna look weird, I know, but let's talk about the Detroit Lions. And I probably sound like one of the biggest Detroit Lion haters in the world in all of these videos. But despite their record, their 12-5 record, they remind me a lot of last year's Vikings team, where yes, their offense is doing some good things. Their coach has really impressed me. I like Dan Campbell. He's doing a lot with that offense, with Jared Goff, with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Their rookie class this year has been superb, one of the best I have ever seen. The defense, on the other hand, the Detroit Lions defense gave up 400 yards to Nick Mullins twice. They gave up 400 yards to Nick Mullins twice. And they almost lost those games. If it weren't for the fact that Nick Mullins was also playing for the Detroit Lions, the Lions would have probably lost both times. When you get a quarterback like Matthew Stafford on the Los Angeles Rams, who is worth, I would argue, roughly, conservative estimate, let's say about 34 Nick Mullins. I think that's a fair comparison. I think it would take about 34 Nick Mullins to be the player that Matthew Stafford is. And you give this man Matthew Stafford, who has had a career defined by having an absurdly strong arm with ridiculous accuracy, who holds the prestigious accomplishment of not only being the man who threw to Calvin Johnson when he had the most receiving yards in a single year by a single player, but he also was the quarterback who threw to the man who had the second most receiving yards by a single player in a single year, who is also the man who has thrown the most yards to the greatest receiving rookie year we have ever seen, and you put that man against the Detroit Lions defense. I don't want to be too hyperbolic when I say I think Matt Stafford has the potential to throw for 700 yards, because this Detroit Lions defense, I do not think they are prepared to face someone who has the passing acumen that their former quarterback, Matthew Stafford, has. When I think about the games that the Detroit Lions have played this season, I cannot think of a single quarterback they've played that has anywhere near the kind of arm strength that Matthew Stafford does. And that includes Dak Prescott, that includes Lamar Jackson. And speaking of that game, by the way, between Dallas and Detroit, I know in my previous video I said I was really hoping it would be a shootout. I was hoping for a very high-scoring game, kind of like that Monday night game we had between the Rams and Chiefs a few years ago. I was hoping for a repeat of that, and I do understand that there was some rather interesting calls that were made there in that Detroit Lions game, and I will concede that is the most impressed I have ever been by the Lions this year. I think the Lions played very well in that game. I think they probably should have won that game. But we now live in a world where they didn't. And I think it's going to come back to bite them horribly. Because we also have to remember, the Los Angeles Rams won the Super Bowl. I think it was either last year or the year before. No, it was the year before. Yeah. Right? I don't know. Years and time is hard for me. I think it may have been the year before, because last year was Kansas City and the Eagles, and then before that I think it was Cincinnati and LA. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that the Rams have been to the Super Bowl before. They've been to the playoffs before. The last time the Detroit Lions made the playoffs was 30 years ago. Probably more than that, actually. I don't know the correct timing. It's been a while. It's been a great long while since the Detroit Lions have made the postseason. I don't want to be too much of a hater to the Detroit Lions because they've suffered enough. But I don't think they're quite ready yet. You know what I mean? Again, they remind me a lot like last year's Vikings team. Will they repeat the same result and lose a close game because their defense just can't get it done? Maybe. Or will Matt Stafford have the single greatest game by a quarterback ever? We'll see. Personally, I'm voting for the latter. I want to see Matt Stafford do Matt Stafford things and be the guy that he always was, despite the doubters, despite the haters, because Matt Stafford is a very, very good player and always has been. And I'm glad to see that he's healthy again. I'm glad to see the Rams have turned their season around, much like the Bills did. And their running back, I forget his name, Williams, I think. It looks like they finally figured out their running game after trying for the last 3 years. So, I think the Rams could surprise some people. What won't surprise people, however, is the Dallas Cowboys beating the Green Bay Packers. Because, yes, the Green Bay Packers went on a little bit of a roll at the end of the season. Jordan Love has looked perfectly acceptable as a quarterback. There's been a lot of talk about Jordan Love and, having similar numbers to what Aaron Rodgers did his first time starting. And, I understand the media types, they need something to talk about. But what I want to say on the matter is Jordan Love is nowhere near Aaron Rodgers. And you can tell. You can tell when you watch the games. Jordan Love is not Aaron Rodgers. I don't think this really needs to be a discussion because it shouldn't be. I don't know why they're trying to make it a discussion. Jordan Love just is not Aaron Rodgers. And you can tell when you watch the games because there's so many plays that I've seen of this Green Bay Packers team this year where they will have a wide receiver wide open. And when I see those plays, I always think, God, if Aaron Rodgers was on this team, they might be very, very good. But they don't have Aaron Rodgers. They have Jordan Love. So they're just kind of mediocre. They're just kind of good enough to get to the postseason. I think that Jordan Love could have the potential to grow into like an Alex Smith or an Andy Dalton type, Derek Carr sort of thing, right? And, whether or not you want that for a franchise, who knows, right? If you want a quarterback that's good enough that you can't get rid of him, but not good enough to win the games when it matters, I don't know. With the Packers too, it's a lot like the Steelers and the Texans, where this is a very young team. I think it's the youngest team in the NFL. I think they need time to develop a little bit. I think they will be really good next year. I think the NFC North might be the best division in football next year. Should everything fall the way I think it's going to. And maybe I'll make a video talking about that sometime in March when some more things are figured out. And, the off-season cycle begins. But who knows for sure. But I think the Packers need more time to develop. So I think for that reason, and, for very similar reasons to some of these other picks where I don't think they have better wide receivers than the Cowboys. I don't think their defense is better than the Cowboys, and I don't think their run game, which is probably about equal to the Cowboys will be good enough. So, for that reason, I will be picking the Dallas Cowboys. And I know this looks exactly identical. I did not mean for that to happen. It's just how it worked out. So, moving on to the divisional round. This is where it starts to get a little bit more interesting because we're going to switch things up a little. We're going to talk about the NFC first. We have 2 divisional games. Both of these teams are in the same division with each other. That makes it very interesting, very entertaining. Here's where I'm going to stand on the matter. In the first game, I'm going to pick the Cowboys. The Cowboys beat the Eagles not too long ago. I don't think the Eagles... I don't know. The Eagles are really hard for me because they started the year very strong. They had a great start to the year. As the year has progressed, however, man, it's not looking good for the Eagles. And I don't want to harp on them too much. The NFL season is unpredictable, as I think is very evident by my mispredictions. I think this is the first time that the Cowboys will be advancing to the conference final in a long time, the championship game. I don't know, but I really just think overall the Cowboys have the better roster. In the last 3 weeks, Dak Prescott has been the better quarterback. Is he better than Jalen Hurts overall? It's hard to say, but getting less hard to say. Do you know what I mean? Right? Like, Jalen Hurts, I love the guy. I was a huge fan of his coming out of college. I wanted my team to draft him. That didn't happen. I think he has some room to improve. I think losing Brian Daboll, was his offensive coordinator a couple years ago, and then he was hired by the Giants. I think. I don't remember. I just know that the Eagles had a coordinator that really, really helped Jalen Hurts. Brian Daboll may have been with the Bills, actually, now that I think about it. But regardless, Eagles have lost a couple personnel. Jalen Hurts hasn't really looked the same. They have a lot of weapons in Philadelphia. They have a lot of good players. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. The running backs don't impress me. Their O-line is really good. Their D-line is really good. Their corners are kind of suspect. But I don't think any of those groups really beat out the Cowboys. I think they're even in a lot of places, except quarterback. I think as the moment stands, I think Dak Prescott is better. It's in Dallas. Dallas hates Philly. I think this will be a really good game, but I think Dallas just barely beats them out. And with the second game in the NFC, I'm also going to take the favorite. I'm taking the Arizona Cardinals. Why did I just say the Cardinals? That is the San Francisco 49ers. I was looking at the Cardinals logo right over here. Please excuse me, and let's move on. Now, I think this will be a closer game than the Eagles and Cowboys, but I think it'll be less heated. I think it'll be less controversial. I think both teams will just play really, really, really well. I'm hoping for this to be a shootout. Lots of offense. I like offense. But this is where I fall back on my defense and run game, right? I think the 49ers unquestionably have the better defense compared to the Rams. I don't think they have the better quarterback. I'm not sure they have the better coach. But their defense and their run game trump the Rams. Just comparing these two isn't even fair, right? Yes, the Rams running back is playing very, very well, but Christian McCaffrey is Christian McCaffrey. That's all I'll say about that. I think the Niners, when it comes down to it, I think the Niners, again, just better defense, better run game. I'm taking that every day of the week. And we'll see where that gets us here in a minute. For the time being, let's move to the left. Let's talk about the AFC. I'm taking both favorites again. I do think, however, this matchup here between the Bills and the Browns, I think is the closest matchup we're going to get until we get to the Super Bowl between these two teams, or two conferences, sorry. I'm going to take the Bills, and I can't really say that I'm taking this for some of the other teams where I take the better defense, I take the better run game, because I do think Cleveland has both of those. I think Cleveland has the better defense. I think they have the better run game. However, this instance, I'm taking the better quarterback. I've done that a little bit over some of these games, but in this instance, I think the Buffalo Bills just constantly get to the championship. I don't think that's going to change. Last year, I honestly can't remember where they were last year. If it was the championship or the divisional that they were knocked out. But I think the Bills, with the momentum that they've had, with the way that they've been playing, I think just slightly, they're better than the Browns are. It's tough. It really is tough, because it's either you take the better defense and the better run game, or you take the better quarterback and home field advantage. And I have thought about this matchup a lot, where it really is just so difficult to predict the NFL. I think it's way harder than any other sport to predict the NFL, but I'm just taking the Buffalo Bills, man. I don't think I could. I don't know. I think I could be talked into either one of these teams winning this game, but I think, yeah, it's tough. It really is tough between these Great Lake teams. Well, at least I think Cleveland is next to one of the Great Lakes. I don't know anything about Ohio. I failed geography. Anyway, I don't know what that tangent was about, but to make my point clear at the end of all this, I'm taking the Buffalo Bills. And I'm also taking the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I believe we did see this matchup earlier in the year. Let me just make a double check to make sure. Versus the Miami Dolphins. Let's take a grand old look. Yes, we saw this just the other week, actually. I forgot about this game because I watched 2 quarters of it and immediately knew the Baltimore Ravens were winning because they won 56-19. I believe that's all I need to say on the matter. But I will reiterate again, as I've said, and I believe all 3 of these videos I've said, I think the Baltimore Ravens are the best team in the NFL. I don't think it's close. And with that said, I'm taking the Baltimore Ravens in the championship as well. I apologize to Buffalo Bills fans, okay? You guys have been here a lot. You've been in the conference championship a lot. And you're going to lose again. It sucks, I know. But maybe next year will finally be your year. We'll see. I think you need to address some wide receiver depth and some positions on the defensive line, but I think you guys have a future. More of a future than I thought you did at the start of this year, and at the middle of this year, and close to the end of the year, but We'll see where you guys end up next year. Congratulations on a great season. I am sorry that you've had to run into the Baltimore Ravens in 2023. Moving on to the NFC, we have a classic matchup. Granted, this all happened before my time. This is the 80s and 90s and 2000s, I think, where it was the Cowboys and the Niners all the time in the conference championship, and we see it happen again. This, I think, would be the second closest match after the Bills and Browns, and I think it's really close, actually, because I think the 49ers are a very good team. I think the Cowboys are a very good team. They both have great defenses, except the Cowboys are a little worse against the run than the 49ers are. But the Cowboys are also slightly better against the pass, I believe. I haven't looked at the stats in a while, but I think they're slightly better against the pass than the 49ers are. But not, not much, not well enough to have the passing game matter. Where it does matter, though, is their run defense, which is, not great. It looked better against the Lions than I thought it would, or maybe the Lions' run game just wasn't coached very well. Either of those two things could be true. I think this is the game where we find out how good their run defense really is, and I'm going to take the better run game. Dallas has the better quarterback without question. The 49ers have the better run game without question. It's tough, but I'm taking the Niners. And finally, I'm taking the Baltimore Ravens. I don't really foresee a team that is better than the Ravens right now. The Ravens also played the Niners earlier this year. They didn't, wallop them the way that they did the Dolphins and the Detroit Lions, but they did beat them. And I don't see where the 49ers have changed in that time to make them good enough to beat the Ravens. So we'll take one last look at the bracket here for review. Starting at the top, working our way to the bottom, Chiefs, Dolphins. I am taking the Miami Dolphins over the Kansas City Chiefs. In the second game, I'm taking the Buffalo Bills over the Pittsburgh Steelers. I will also be taking the Cleveland Browns over the Houston Texans in the third wildcard game. Moving forward in the AFC, I'm taking the Baltimore Ravens over the Miami Dolphins, and I'm taking the Bills over the Cleveland Browns. For the AFC Conference Championship, I am taking the Baltimore Ravens over the Buffalo Bills. In the NFC, I am taking the Los Angeles Rams over the Detroit Lions. I am taking the Dallas Cowboys over the Green Bay Packers. I am taking the Philadelphia Eagles over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In the wild card round, I am taking the San Francisco 49ers over the Los Angeles Rams. I am also taking the Cowboys of Dallas over the Philadelphia Eagles. In the National Football League Conference Championship game, I am taking the Niners over the Cowboys. And in your 2023-24 NFL season, I am taking the Baltimore Ravens to win the entire thing. I thank you very much for tuning into my channel, showing support, and enjoying my content. If, in fact, you did make it all the way to the end of this video, consider subscribing to support the channel and see more content from me. Once again, I thank you all so much for watching. It is always a pleasure, and I will speak with you all again soon. Goodbye for now.